Good day, everyone. So, welcome to our first ever lesson or discussion. For today, we will talk about the learner centered psychological principles, or in short, the LCP. So, we will talk about principles that explain how learners, that means you, think, feel, and act while learning. So, these principles help the teachers understand what really helps students learn better. Learner centered psychological principles have the 14 principles. So, the 14 principles have the following aspects. So, number one is they focus on psychological factors that are primarily internal to and under the control of the learner rather than conditioned habits or physiological factors. So, however, the principles also attempt to acknowledge external environment or contextual factors that interact with these internal factors. So, meaning they focus on psychological factors. Ano po? So, um, we have the internal factors. So, let's break it down, or let's break it one on one, or one by one. So, it says here that um, we have here the internal factors. So, ibig sabihin, the focus daw po is number one is on the internal factors. This means that the learning depends mostly on what happens inside your mind. So things like your thinking skills, your motivation, your interest in learning, your memory, and your attitude toward the school. So these are the psychological factors. So they are called the internal because they come from within you, and most of them are under your control. So for example, imagine you imagine yourself studying a math. So you focus as well, or believes that you can solve the problems, and you keep trying even when it's hard. So you are using the internal factors. So your motivation, your attention, and your confidence are all working together to help you learn better. It was also mentioned here the external factors, that is our environment or the contextual factors. So these principles also attempt to acknowledge ano po, not only our internal factor, but also our external environment, or what we call the contextual factors that interact with our internal factors. So this means that while what's inside the learner is important, the outside world, like the classroom, the teacher, the classmates, or home environment, also affects the learning. So let's go back to our example earlier. So excuse me. Um, if you are even if you are motivated, if the classroom is noisy, or you doesn't get enough support from the teacher, or you feel unsafe, those external factors can make it harder for you to concentrate. So both what's inside of you or what's around her influence how well she learns. Ano po? Next is the interaction between the external and the internal factors. So the key point here is that learning happens through the interaction between what's inside the learner and what's the outside. So your thoughts, your feelings, and motivation work together with your environment. So for example, a positive and encouraging classroom can increase a student's confidence and motivation. So this makes learning more effective. So to summarize this, no, it says here that the learner-centered psychological principles focus mainly on the internal psychological factors. That is, the things inside the learner, like thinking, like motivation, and emotion. But they also recognize the external factors, like the classroom environment, the teacher, and the social context, because this can influence how internal factors work. So, in short, the good learning happens when both the mind of the learner and the learning environment support each other. So, let's now proceed to the second. So the principles are intended to deal holistically with learners in the context of a real world learning situations. They are best understood as an organized set of principles. So no principle should be viewed in isolation. So again, let's break this down together. So it was mentioned holistically. So holistic view of the learner. So when we say holistic, that is a whole or complete. So when we say the principles deal holistically with learners, it means we don't just focus on one part of the student, like memory or motivation alone. Instead, we look at the whole person, their thoughts, their emotions, their social relationships, the backgrounds, and also the environment. So, for example, you have a student that fails in a quiz. So, if I am the teacher and I think holistically, won't assume he just didn't study. So I might also consider that this student could be tired or stressed or worried about something at home. So learning isn't just about studying. So it's affected by the whole person and their real life situation. So again po, no, if you are um if you will teach in the future, you have to be or you have to deal holistically. So next po is we have the real world learning situation. So it was also mentioned here, the real world situations. So this statement also says that learning doesn't happen in isolation or only inside the classroom. So students learn better when lessons are connected to real life experiences and problems. So for example is you are teaching math. So um your lesson is about budgeting. So if you will apply it by planning how to spend it in a weekly allowance, that's the real world learning. It makes lessons meaningful and easier to understand. Next is we have the principles work together, not in the isolation. So this statements reminds us that the 14 learner-centered principles are connected to each other. We shouldn't look at them one by one as if they work separately. They all support each other. So for example, the motivation, that is one of the principle, affects how much effort a student puts in. And the effort affects understanding. That is another principle. So if a student is motivated and confident, they'll probably think more deeply and learn better. So those principles interact like puzzle pieces. They only make sense when they fit together. Next is the 14 principles are divided into those referring to cognitive and metacognitive. We have also the motivational and affective. We have also the developmental and social. And we have also the individual difference factors influencing learners and learning. So let's first discuss the cognitive and metacognitive factors. So these factors are about how learners think, understand and remember informations. Kasi we all know that cognitive means mental processes like thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. When we are talking about the metacognitive naman, this means that thinking about your own thinking, knowing how you learn best. Again, I will repeat again, I will emphasize that metacognitive means that thinking about your own thinking. This is knowing how you learn best. Okay, for example, is when you make a study plan or check if you really understand what you are reading, you're using metacognition. For instance, is You read a science lesson and then ask yourself, did I really understand that? If not, you reread the part that you missed. So that's the metacognitive learning. You are aware of how you learned. Next is the motivational and affective factors. So this deals with what makes you want to learn, your motivations, your feelings, and attitude toward learning. So if you're interested in a subject or believe you can succeed, you'll try harder and learn more. If you are in the opposite, you are discouraged or anxious, so learning becomes more difficult. So for example, you love music, so when your teacher uses a song to teach English, you feel excited and learn faster. So that's the motivation and positive emotion that helps you learn. But if you are nervous during the test or you are anxious, it makes harder for you to remember what you studied. So that is the motivational and affective. Next is the developmental and social. So these principles explain how growth and social interactions affect the learning. So as the students grow, their thinking and emotions also develop. So learning is also social. We often learn best through communication, cooperation, and relationships with others. Next is the individual differences. So, um, this last principle reminds us that every learner is unique. So we all have different abilities, learning styles, backgrounds, and experiences. So, of course, a good teaching respects these differences. Okay po. Um, let's now proceed to um, finally, we have the principles are intended to apply to all learners from children to teachers to administrators to parents and to community members involved in our educational system. So it means that this means that learning doesn't only happen to students. So every person involved in education, from children to adults, we can conclude that is a learner. Teachers learn how to teach better. The administrators learn how to manage schools effectively, or the parents learn how to support their children education, and even the community learns how to work together for better schools. So for example, think of a teacher who attends training or workshop. She learns new methods to make her lessons more engaging, so that is already learning. Or consider a parent who learns how to help their child with homework. So that's learning too. So those principles apply to everyone, not just students sitting in the classroom. So the principle apply equally to all. So the same psychological ideas like motivation, the emotion, the thinking, the social relationships, and individual differences apply to all kinds of learner. Ano po? Next is a shared responsibility. When we say the principles apply to everyone in the educational system, it also means that learning is a shared responsibility. So the teachers, the parents, the administrators, and the community must all work together to create a positive environment where learning can flourish. So let's now proceed to number one principles. That is under the cognitive and metacognitive factors. That is the nature of the learning process. So, the learning of a complex subject matter is most effective when it is an intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. So it says here that learning complex topics works best when students are actively trying to make sense of what they learn, not just memorizing facts. So it says here constructing meaning. So the key phrase here is constructing meaning. So here, you can read it here. So that means that the learners build their own understanding by connecting new information with what they already know and by thinking about their experiences. So learning is not just about listening or copying notes. It's about making sense of things, asking questions, and relating lessons to real life. So imagine you are learning about the water cycle, for example. If you simply memorize the words evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, you might forget them later. But if you think how water from puddles dries up after rain, that is evaporation, or how clouds form, that is the condensation, and how it rains again, that is precipitation. So you are connecting the lesson to real experiences. That is constructing meaning. You understand why it happens, not just what happens. Next is the intentional learning or the intentional process. So, this means that learning is most effective when the learner wants to learn and is consciously trying to understand. Intentional learners set goals, plan how to reach them, and check their understanding along the way. So, for example, you want to improve your math skills. You doesn't just do um exercises mindlessly. You pays attention to your mistake, ask someone or ask yourself, what did I get this wrong, and practices until you understand the concept. So this is the intentional learner. You actively involve in your own learning process. Next is the complex learning requires the active thinking. So, when the subject matter is complex, like science, the history, or problem solving, we can just rely on memorization. We need to analyze, we need to compare, we need to question and reflect. So, in short, learning happens best when our mind is actively working. Think of learning building a puzzle. So the teacher gives you the pieces or the information, but you have to figure out how they fit together. So that is how understanding grows. Next principles is the goals of the learning process. So the successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful coherent representations of knowledge. So it talks about these principles says that a successful learner is someone who, over time, and with the help of the teachers and proper guidance, can build a meaningful and well organized knowledge and not just a collection of facts. Let's break it down. Again, learning takes time and guidance. So this means that learning doesn't happen instantly. It's a gradual process that needs time, that needs practice and support. So, students learn best when teachers guide them or explain clearly and help them make sense of what they are learning. So, for example, think of learning how to play a guitar. At first, it's very hard. Your fingers hurt and you forget the chords. But with your teacher's help, and constant practice, you slowly begin to connect the notes, understand the rhythm, and eventually play songs smoothly. So that's how learning works. It takes time and guidance to build the understanding. Next is create meaningful, coherent representations of knowledge. This means organizing what you learn so it makes sense as a whole. Instead of remembering random bits of information, you connect ideas together in your mind. For example, suppose you are learning about ecosystems in science. Instead of memorizing the plants make food or animals eat plants, you start to see the bigger picture. How plants, animals, water, and air are all connected in one system. You've built a coherent understanding. Everything fits together. Next is the role of the teacher. So, these principles also emphasizes the importance of the support and instructional guidance. Teachers are there to help the students organize information. It makes connections and find meaning. So without the guidance of your teacher, or students might collect facts without truly understanding how they relate. For example, is your teacher might help you link a history lesson about ancient civilization to modern society. So she showed you how ideas from the past shape the world today. This helped you as a student see the relationship between the concepts, not just the isolated details. Next is construction of knowledge. This is again under pa rin tayo ng cognitive and metacognitive factors. So the successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Okay, so let's break it down again so you can understand better, the definition of each principle. So again, sinasabi natin kanina na they are connected to each other, the 14 principles. So now we are in the third principles under the cognitive and metacognitive factors. So when we say construction of knowledge, when we learn something new, we don't start from zero. So our brain tries to connect the new information to old ideas or experiences we already have. That's how we construct new knowledge, by adding new layers to the foundations that's already there. So, for example, imagine that you already know how to ride the bicycle. When you learn how to ride a motorcycle, you use your existing balance and steering skills to understand the new task. You're not starting from scratch, you're connecting new learning to what you already know. Next is making learning meaningful. So, when learners make connections, learning becomes meaningful instead of just memorize. If you can relate a new lesson to your own life or previous experiences, it becomes easier to understand and remember. So, for example, is supposed to be you are learning about fractions in math. At first, it seems confusing because that is numbers on top and bottom. But when your teacher shows that one half of pizza means splitting it into two equal parts, you suddenly get it because you're linking the new idea to your real life experience of sharing food. So that's a meaningful learning. Next is the brain connects ideas like web. Sinabi kasi natin that link new information. So our minds store knowledge like a web. Each idea is connected to another. So when we learn something new, we attach it to the right part of the web. The more connections we make, the stronger our understanding becomes. So when you learn about, for example, plants in science and later study the photosynthesis, you connect both topics, the structure of the plant and how it makes food. Then, when you study ecosystems, you connect that knowledge again to understand how plants support all living things. So each topic strengthens the other. Next is the strategic thinking. So These principles or the successful learner can create and use of a repertoire or thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve complex and learning goals. So, these principles explains a good learners don't just rely on memorization. So they use different strategies or methods of thinking to solve problems and reach their learning goals. So what is strategic thinking? So this means using your mind in a planned, thoughtful way. It's about choosing the right approach for the right situation, like deciding how to study, how to solve problem, or how to remember information. Next is building a repertoire or of strategies. The word repertoire here means a collection or set of strategies that you can use when needed. So the successful learners don't just have one way of learning. They have lots. They have many. They know when and how to use each one. Excuse me. So, for example, when reading a story, you might use one strategy, like predicting what happens next. But in math, you might use another, like breaking a problem into a smaller steps, or you pick the best tool for each task. So just like a mechanic chooses the right tool to fix a car. Next is the strategic thinking helps achieve complex goal. So when learning becomes difficult or complex, strategies help you stay focused and find solutions. It's like having a map. It guides you toward your goal instead of wandering without direction. So supposed to be you are writing a research paper. So you need to plan your time, you have to organize your ideas, search for reliable sources, and revise your draft. So each of these steps requires a different strategy. So without strategies, the task would feel overwhelming. But with them, you can manage it successfully. Next is teachers help students develop these strategies. So a big part of the teaching is helping students learn how to learn. So teachers guides students to use thinking strategies such as outlining, questioning, summarizing, or reflecting. So over time, learners use these strategies independently. So, for example, is I might ask, what steps did you take to answer the questions? Or what will you do differently next time? So, these questions make the students aware of their own thinking. So, this is a key part of being a strategic learner. Next is the fifth principle is thinking about thinking. So this is higher order strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operations, facilitate creative and critical thinking. So what does thinking about thinking mean? So this means that taking step back and watching how your own mind operates. So it's like being the coach of your brain. You observe what you are doing, decide if it's working, and make changes if needed. For example, is um, imagine yourself reading a long story, but you realize halfway through that you don't understand it. Instead of giving up, you stop and say, maybe should slow down, reread this part, or take notes. So that is metacognition. You're thinking about your thinking and adjusting your strategy. Next is the higher order strategies. So this means advanced way of managing your thinking, like planning, monitoring, and evaluating your mental activities. So these strategies help you handle complex tasks that require deep understanding. So before starting a project, for example, you might plan what steps to take. While working, you monitor if your plan is working. After finishing, you evaluate what you did well and what you could improve next time. These are all higher order thinking strategies. Next is facilitating creative and critical thinking. When you are aware of your own thinking, it becomes easier to both creative and critical. You can spot mistakes in your reasoning, think of new solutions, and combine ideas in new ways. For example, suppose your teacher asked you to design an eco friendly house. You might first brainstorm, that is the creative thinking, then check which ideas are realistic or effective, that is the critical thinking. By constantly monitoring and refining your thoughts, you produce better and smarter results. Next is teachers can help develop metacognition. So, by asking some of the questions, for example, what strategy did you use to solve that, or why do you think that worked, or what would you do differently next time? So these questions help learners think about their own learning process. Next is the six principles, that is the context of learning. So, learning is influenced by environmental factors, including culture, technology, and instructional practice. So, these principles reminds us that learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. The environment around a learner, including the culture, available technology, and the way lessons are taught, has a strong impact on how well learning occurs. It was mentioned here the environmental factors that affects learning now. The environmental factors, it includes here the everything in the learner's surroundings that support or hinder the learning. This could be physical things like the classrooms, the technology, learning materials, or social and cultural factors like family expectations, the traditions, and peer influence. So, imagine that you are a teacher and you have students learning about coding. So, one of your students has an access to computers, internet tutorials, or supportive peers. The other doesn't have the resources and struggle to practice. So even if both are motivated, the environment makes difference in how easily they learn. Next is culture shapes learning, because it influences values, beliefs, and expectations. So teachers need to recognize the student's background and adapt instruction so all learners can engage meaningfully. For example, in a multicultural classroom, so some students may prefer group discussion while others may prefer individual reflection. So understanding these cultural differences helps teachers create more effective learning experience. Next is technology. We all know that technology can support learning opportunities. So it provides access to information, interactive tools, and ways to collaborate. I'm so sorry. Um, for example, no, the students learning about science. This might use virtual simulations to see chemical reactions safely. So this hands-on experience through technology helps them understand the topic better than just reading a textbook. Next is the instructional practices. So the way teachers teach, that is the instructional methods and strategies. This also influences learning. Good teaching aligns with learners' needs, encourages engagement, and provides support when necessary. For example, if a teacher uses active learning strategies like group projects or problem solving exercises, students are more likely to understand and remember concepts than if they just listen to a culture or to a some um to a teacher talking in front or doing a lecture. So that is the context of learning. Next is a motivational and affective factors. The seventh principle is motivational and emotional influences on learning. So this is what and how much is learned is influenced by the learner's motivation. Motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by individuals' emotional states, beliefs, interests, and goals and habits of thinking. So, this principle says that the amount and quality of learning depends a lot on the learner's motivation. And your motivation isn't random, ha? It's affected by your emotions. It's affected also by your beliefs, your interests, goals, and how you think about learning. So let's first discuss the motivation that drives learning. So when you are motivated, you are more likely to pay attention, try harder, and persist through challenges. Without motivation, even important lesson may not be learned well. Next is emotions. So, of course, emotion plays a big role in motivation. Positive emotions like interest, curiosity, or enjoyment can boost motivation, while stress or fear or anxiety can reduce it. How about the beliefs, the interests, and the goals? So, motivation is also influenced by what you believe, what you care about, and what you hope to achieve. So, students who believe they can succeed, who are interested in the topic, and who have clear goals will be more motivated to learn. Next is habits of thinking. The way you habitually think also affects motivation. So, optimistic and reflective thinking can strengthen motivation, while the negative or fixed mindsets can hinder the thinking. So, let us now proceed to number eight principle. That is the intrinsic motivation to learn. So, the learner's creativity, higher order thinking, and the natural curiosity all contribute to motivation to learn. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by tasks of optimal novelty and difficulty relevant to personal interest and providing for personal choice and control. So, this principle tells us that learners are naturally motivated when they can use their creativity. They can think deeply or explore their curiosity. So, the intrinsic motivation comes from enjoying the learning process itself rather than just aiming for a reward like grades. So, let's first discuss the what stimulates intrinsic motivation. So the intrinsic motivation is strongest when learning tasks are novel and challenging. So these are the new experiences that stretch your thinking, relevant to personal interest that is connected to things you care about, and then providing choice and control. So this is giving you some say in how you learn. Next is the role of curiosity, the creativity, and the higher order thinking. So these principles also highlights um those I've mentioned, the curiosity, the creativity, and the higher order thinking. This fuels also motivation. So when learners explore, ask questions, solve problems, and create new ideas, they feel engaged and motivated naturally. So, for example, as a student asked to create a science experiment or design a model or write a story uses higher order thinking. They are thinking critically, making decisions, and expressing creativity, which keeps them intrinsically motivated. Next is personal choice and control. Giving learners some control over what they do and how they do it, and it increases intrinsic motivation. It makes them feel ownership of their learning. which makes the experience more meaningful. For example, in the history class, teacher might let students choose whether to make a presentation, write a report, or create a timeline. So by letting students decide, they are more engaged and motivated to do their best at work. Next is effects of motivation on efforts. So acquisition of complex knowledge and skills requires extended learner effort and guided practice. Without learners' motivation to learn, the willingness to assert this effort is unlikely without coercion. These principles emphasizes that learning complex skills or knowledge takes time, takes practice, and persistence. Motivation is the driving force that makes learners willing to put in this effort. Let us break it down. Learning requires effort. So, learning something difficult, like mastering a language, playing an instrument, or solving advanced math problems, cannot happen instantly. It requires repeated practice and focus over time. Think of playing instrument. It takes many hours of practice to play a song smoothly. So, if you as a learner is motivated, they'll keep practicing or even when it's hard. If your motivation is low, you may give up quickly and or only practice when forced. Next is motivation drives willingness to work hard. So, the motivation makes the learners willing to put in effort voluntarily. Without motivation, the students often need external pressure like grades, rewards, or punishment to work hard, and that is less effective for a long term learning. Next is guided practice is important. So motivation alone isn't enough. So learners also need guidance and practice. So the teachers help by providing instructions, feedback, or support while learners practice complex tasks. For example, is a teacher helping students to solve physics problems. The teacher will guide them step by step at first and gradually let them try on their own. So, motivation encourages students to keep practicing until they master the skill. Next principle under the developmental and social factors is developmental influences on learning. So, as individuals develop, there are different opportunities and constraints for learning. So, learning is most effective when the differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. So, um, these principles says that as people grow, they experience different strength and limitations in learning. So effective teaching considers the whole person, their physical, their intellectual, and emotional and social development. So let's discuss it one by one. Learning opportunities and constraint for um, learning. As learners develop, they gain new abilities but also face certain limits. For example, young children have amazing curiosity and imagination but may struggle with abstract thinking. Another example is teenagers may think more logically but still need guidance in emotional regulation. Next is consider also the physical, the intellectual, emotional, and social domains. So, always remember that learning is not just about intellect. So, it also involves the physical development, like the fine motor skills for writing, emotional development, ability, this is your ability to handle frustration or to manage the stress. Next is the social development. This is your ability to work in teams or understand social rules. Next is tailoring learning to development differences. So each learner is unique. Even children of the same age can develop differently in different domains. So recognizing these differences help teachers provide appropriate challenges and support. Next principles is the social influences on learning. So learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. So this principle says that learning doesn't happen in isolation, just like what I've mentioned earlier. The people around us, the teachers, the classmates, family members, and peers all influence how and what we learn. So, learning through social interactions. So, social interaction provide opportunities to exchange ideas, ask questions, or receive feedback. So, when learners collaborate or communicate with others, they can deepen their understanding and gain new perspective. Next is the interpersonal relations. So, the relationship learners have with others also affect motivation and engagement. Positive relationship with peers and teachers can boost confidence and encourage participation, while the negative relationships can hinder the learning. Next is the communication. Effective communication help learners clarify their thinking, understand different perspectives, and co-construct knowledge. Discussion, the debate, the cooperative problem solving are always that communication supports learning. Next is the individual differences in learning. That is the 12th principle. So learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are a function of prior experiences and heredity. So, these principles emphasizes that every learner is unique. So, these differences come from two main sources. That is the prior experiences and their inherited traits. So, let's first discuss the different strategies and approaches. So the learners may use different strategies to understand the same material. Some may prefer reading, others listening, and some learning by doing. So recognizing these differences help teachers design lessons that reach all learners. Next is capabilities shaped by experiences and heredity. Learners' abilities are influenced by their past experiences and their genetic makeup. So experiences shapes what they already know and how they think, while the heredity can affect things like memory, attention, or natural talents. For example, is a student who has grown up gardening may quickly understand plant biology. So another student with a musical background may excel in rhythm-based learning activities. Both bring different capabilities to the classroom, shaped by experience and their innate traits. Next is teaching strategies for individual differences. So always remember that teaching takes these differences into account. Teachers provide multiple pathways to learning, varied activities, and flexible assessment so all students can succeed. Next, learning principles is the learning and diversity. Learning is most effective when differences in learners' linguistic, cultural, and social background are taken into account. So, these principles explains us that learners come from different languages, cultures, and social environments. Learning works best when teachers recognize and respect these differences, adapting instruction to meet a diverse needs. Let's first discuss the linguistic differences. So, learners may speak different languages or have varying levels of language proficiency. So, teachers need to adjust language use, provide support, or use multiple modes of communication to ensure understanding. Next is the no, where are we? Next is the cultural differences. Um, the cultural backgrounds shape learners' perspectives, values, and ways of thinking. So, teachers who integrate cultural relevance into lessons make learning more meaningful. Next is the social differences, social backgrounds, including the community, the socioeconomic status, or the influence learning opportunities and experiences. So the teacher should consider these factors when designing tasks and providing support. And the last principle is the standards and assessment. Setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learner as well as learning progress, including diagnostic, process, and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process. So these principles emphasizes that learning works best when learners are challenged with high but achievable standards. Assessment isn't about grades. It's about understanding the learner, tracking progress, and guiding improvement. Let's first discuss the high and challenging standards. So, setting high standards encourages learners to stretch their abilities and reach their potential. Challenges should be appropriate for the learner's developmental level and capabilities. Next is assessing the learner and the learning progress. Assessment should focus not only on the final product, but also on how the learner is progressing and developing skills along the way. So we have three main types of assessment. We have the diagnostic, the process, and the outcome assessment. So when we say diagnostic assessment, that is identifies um, prior knowledge and learning needs. Process assessment, you monitor the progress while learning. Next is the outcome assessment, that is, you evaluate the final result of the mastery of the skills. Next is the assessment as an integral part of learning. So, assessment isn't separate from learning, it's part of the learning process itself. So, good assessment guides instruction, helps learners improve, and motivates them to achieve high standards. So those are the 14 learning principles under the LCP. But on the other hand, we have here the summary of Alexander R. Murphy. So si Alexander R. Murphy created a summary of those 14 principles. And number one is the knowledge base. That is once existing knowledge serves as the foundation of all future learning. So, learning builds on what you already know. Your prior knowledge forms the foundation for understanding new information. So, if the learners have a strong base, new ideas are easier to grasp. If the base is weak, learning becomes harder. So, let's first discuss the strategic processing and control. That is the metacognition. So, learners can develop skills to reflect and regulate their thoughts and behaviors, and in order to learn more effectively. That is, um, for example, this is about thinking about thinking, just like what I've mentioned earlier. So, learners who plan, monitor, and evaluate their own learning can control their strategies and improve outcomes. Next is motivation and affect. Factors such as intrinsic motivation from within, that is reasons for wanting to learn, personal goals, and enjoyment of learning tasks, all have a crucial role in the learning. So, um, we all know that motivation drives learning, as we've mentioned earlier. When learners are interested, curious, or have a personal goals, they invest more effort and persist through challenges. Next is development and individual differences. So learning is a unique journey for each person because each learner has his own unique combination of a genetic and environmental factors that influence him. So each learner is different in their abilities, in their experiences, and growth affect how they learn. So teachers need to adapt instruction to fit these differences. Next is situation or context. Learning happens in the context of a society as well as within an individual. So, learning doesn't happen in isolation. We also mentioned this earlier in the 14th principle. The environment, the culture, the technology, and social interaction all influence how and what we learn. So, to sum it up, the Alexander and Murphy highlight the five key factors of for effective learning. That is the knowledge base, that is built on what learners already know. Strategic processing, that is the metacognition. You reflect and control your learning strategies. Motivation and affect, that is intrinsic motivation and personal goals driving learning, and then development and individual differences. You have to recognize that each learner is unique and the situation and context. That is, learning is influenced by the environment, by the culture, and the social interaction. So, thank you very much for listening. So, I hope you understand something from our first discussion. Again po, if you have any questions, clarifications, or concerns regarding the discussion, please do message me in our group chat if you have any questions to our discussion. So again, it's better po to ask or to clarify anything that is not clear to you. So for your attendance, you have to answer this in the comment section below. You have to write your name first. Again, I will repeat ha. You have to write your name first and your cluster. For example, Raging de Luna from Mindanao. So, alam ko kung saan, where will I put your grades? So, answer this. So, write your answer in the comment section. This consists of 20 points. From the discussion on learner-centered psychological principles, I learned that, okay po, no? So, I will just wait for your answers. So this will serve as your attendance. So the deadline of submission is only until Friday. That is October 10th. So beyond October 10th, I will not accept it anymore. So it means that you're absent during our online um, discussion. So thank you very much for listening. So I hope you understand something and I hope you study our first lesson.